Welcome to this session on the internal assessment. First of all, we're going to consider the task, which requires that the audience consists of experienced DP teachers. So we will be working under the assumption that they understand how to select both an effective visual stimulus as well as an effective literary abstract. Therefore, during this session, we're not really going to focus on discovering or exploring what is an effective stimulus. By the end of this session, we hope that participants are able to explain to their students the requirements of the internal assessment, in this case the individual oral, and they will also feel more confident in understanding how to apply the assessment criteria when marking this component. So let us start by highlighting how the assessment objectives are applicable to the internal assessment. And this is just not the case for the other components at all times. So we'll ask participants, first of all, to go to page 17 of the guide, where they can take a couple of minutes to read through the assessment objectives, or perhaps take some notes on them, or put them on a post-it note, just to identify what assessment objectives we're going to be looking at in the individual oral. As we understand the requirement, we're going to then focus on this image. The internal assessment is an individual oral, and we're going to work with 4 premises. First of all, in both cases, higher and standard level, the internal assessment is only an individual oral interaction on an unseen stimulus. The second premise is that the individual oral is based on the 5 themes, as we can see here. The same 5 themes would revolve around the higher level also. The third premise is that in both cases, the individual oral is worth 25% of the grade. And the final premise is that the assessment criteria are in some ways the same, yet the descriptors within each level are designed to reflect the degree of complexity and difficulty expected in each respective level. Now, the nature of the internal assessment is fundamental to the course, because this is the only way that students can understand that they master the skills and the knowledge in order to function in the target language effectively. So through the individual oral, they will understand that they need to develop particular interactive abilities while working in the classroom on a wide variety of tasks that we as teachers prepare on a day-to-day basis for them. Therefore, we could open up a moment for a brief discussion about some ideas that these experienced DP teachers use in the classroom to emphasize on oral interactions. Ideally, teachers will be planning their lessons in a way where students are able to put into practice all the skills that are needed to be prepared for the individual oral. And that's why here we see the very first image, the 2 people interacting. You'll have the student and the teacher. Now, we're going to look at the difference between the higher and the standard level, and we'll start off with the standard level. For the standard level, the teacher will choose 2 visual stimuli, and each one has to be related to a different theme. That means that if I choose one related to sharing the planet, the other one should be related to experiences or human ingenuity or identity. The visual stimulus has to be labeled in the target language and with the theme to which it relates. Then we have 3 moments during this oral. The first one is the description, which is 3 to 4 minutes. Second, the discussion, 4 to 5 minutes, and the general discussion, 5 to 6 minutes. Now, these 3 parts are going to be linked to the assessment criteria, which we'll see in a few more minutes. Then we highlight the requirements for higher level, which is a literary extract from 2 literary works that were studied during the course. Each one is around 300 words, and the student will use 20 minutes preparation time to take notes, which can be referred to but not read. So again, we have the amount of time that they should be using in each of them, and all in all, these are the main differences between them. Then we move on to the assessment criteria. And if we look at them just superficially, we can see that they're very similar. For higher level, which is the literary extract, we have language, the B1, which is the message, and B2, the message for the conversation. Finally, you have the interactive part, which is communication. So this is the same requirement for both higher and standard level. And even though the descriptions are pretty similar, it is not until we actually look at the particular elements of each descriptor that we can identify those differences. So the idea would be for us to work in groups, in small groups with our participants, and highlight those aspects of the criteria that they can see the differences between the higher and the standard level. Take, for example, in language, if we think about the higher level course, let's say the 7 to 9 mark band, command of the language is effective and mostly accurate, we would then have our groups highlight the differences in the actual descriptors in the 7 to 9 mark band, for example. So they would see that for the very first strand, vocabulary is appropriate to the task and varied, but then for higher level, they additionally state that it has to include the use of idiomatic expressions. So teachers would spend approximately 30 minutes looking through these differences, highlighting them in their small groups, and then we would put them up together into a big visual so that everybody could compare where they actually caught the differences between higher and standard level. And that would eat most of the time for the session. Thank you for listening.